90% of the political icons you follow are hiding a secret about their past that would change everything you think you know about them. If I told you that the voice of the working class actually grew up in a mansion-filled suburb with property taxes higher than most people's annual savings, would you still believe their narrative? The Senate House Joint Committee on Economic Policy hearing room was packed beyond capacity this Wednesday morning, the air thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the palpable electricity of an impending collision. At the center of the storm sat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her $2,500 Tory Burch pantsuit, a stark contrast to the populist rhetoric she usually delivers to her 11 million followers. She moved with the poise of royalty, flanked by a Hollywood-caliber entourage of press secretaries, social media managers, and 3 hand-picked reporters granted exclusive access. Across from her sat Senator J.D. Vance alone, wearing an off-the-rack dark suit, carrying nothing but a single weathered manila folder, no cameras, no personal photographers, just a small Marine Corps pin on his lapel. The official topic was working-class economic opportunity in modern America, but the atmosphere suggested an execution of a reputation. The gallery was split. Young progressives in tax-the-rich shirts on one side, hushed onlookers on the other. Vance didn't wait for the usual political pleasantries or opening statements that dominate these hearings. He leaned into the microphone, his calm Midwestern voice cutting through the room like a knife through silk. "Congresswoman," Vance began, his eyes locking onto hers with a precision that made the gallery go silent. "I know when someone is faking it." The sound of Vance placing the manila folder onto the mahogany table was a dry, hollow thud that seemed to echo through the chambers. AOC's confident smile faltered for a fraction of a second, her hands tightening around her water glass, her statement jewelry clinking against the table. "How dare you question my background?" she shot back, her voice shaking with a defensive fire. "You're a venture capitalist who went to Yale Law School. You're the privileged elite trying to silence a woman of color who actually fights for working people. You wouldn't know struggle if it hit you in the face." Vance didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply opened the folder to the first page, a set of property records and census data. "I grew up in Middletown, Ohio, where the factories closed and the American dream went to die," he said quietly. "My mother struggled with opioid addiction. I was raised by my grandmother in poverty. I joined the Marines to survive because it was my only path out. I went to Ohio State on the GI Bill and earned my way to Yale through sacrifice, not privilege. But today, we aren't talking about my past. We're talking about Yorktown Heights." As he began to read the median home values $547,000 and the prestigious ratings of Yorktown High School, which ranks in the top 5% of all New York public schools, the flush on AOC's face deepened from a professional glow to a burning red of genuine anger. "You've built your entire political brand on being the girl from the Bronx who understands the struggle," Vance continued, pulling out a timeline. "But the truth is, you lived there until you were 5. Then your family moved to Yorktown Heights in Westchester County. Your father was an architect with his own firm. Your mother was a real estate agent. Your combined household income put you in the top 10% of American households. That isn't working class, Congresswoman. That is upper middle class security." This was no longer a debate about economics. It was a clinical dissection of a political identity built on a foundation of Westchester County luxury. The tension in the room reached a breaking point as Vance revealed the first photograph from the folder, a yearbook photo of AOC in her high school performing arts center and facility with an Olympic-sized swimming pool and professional-grade labs. "You didn't move back to the Bronx until 2017, 1 year before you ran for Congress," Vance noted, his tone remaining factual and devoid of malice, which only made the sting more potent. "That isn't being from the Bronx. That's relocating for political opportunity and then rebranding yourself to fit a demographic." AOC's staff began whispering urgently, their social media strategy crumbling in real time. The media, which had come prepared to write about AOC schools, another Republican, began revising their narratives as the documents hit the table. Vance's thumb hovered over the next document in the pile, a set of financial records that promised to turn the bartender struggle into a tale of calculated careerism. "You mention bartending constantly," Vance said, "but you worked at an upscale taco and tequila bar in Union Square, one of Manhattan's wealthiest areas. You were living at home, rent-free, in your mother's $500,000 house, commuting to a job that catered to the urban elite. That isn't struggle. That is a privileged young person finding themselves after a $60,000 a year education at Boston University." As the cameras flashed and the reporters leaned forward, The first major crack in the legendary socialist brand appeared. The gallery sat in shocked silence. Vance was effectively demonstrating that the voice of the working class might actually be the ultimate carpetbagger. The reason this matters, Vance said, leaning forward, is because you use this false biography as a weapon to dismiss people who actually lived the struggle you only read about. Before her allies could recover or formulate a rebuttal, Vance prepared to deliver the final blow. He gathered the records of her Yorktown childhood and set them aside, reaching for a second, thicker folder. But the fake background is just the beginning, Vance stated, his blue eyes sharp and unyielding. Let's discuss how you live now as a democratic socialist. Let's talk about $35,000 Met Gala tickets and the $2,500 designer suit you're wearing right now while you preach about taxing the rich. Vance opened the new folder toward her, revealing a section dedicated to the gap between her rhetoric and her reality, leading the room toward a confrontation that would soon go viral across every platform from TikTok to the nightly news. Interactive takeaway: political authenticity is the currency of the modern age. If you found this breakdown of the Vance AOC confrontation insightful, click the like button and share this post. Tell us in the comments, does a politician's upbringing change how you view their policies, or should we only focus on their actions in office? Join the discussion now. Don't let the mainstream narrative be the only one you hear. Would you like me to expand on the next section regarding the Met Gala controversy? The Bronx myth versus the Westchester reality. The palpable tension in the Senate hearing room shifted from mere political posturing to a surgical deconstruction of a personal brand as Senator J.D. Vance prepared to present his evidence. While the previous moments were defined by sharp verbal exchanges, the atmosphere suddenly grew heavy with the weight of documented facts. Vance didn't just lean on rhetoric, he leaned on the cold, hard numbers that define the American experience. A tale of two childhoods. The contrast between the two figures at the table could not have been more striking. Vance adjusted his microphone, his voice steady as he began to dismantle the girl from the Bronx narrative that has served as the cornerstone of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's political identity. Congresswoman, you've built your brand on understanding the working class struggle, Vance stated, sliding a series of documents across the mahogany table. But while I was navigating a childhood in Middletown, Ohio, marked by factory closures, my family's battle with opioid addiction, and the constant threat of utility shutoffs, your reality was quite different. He produced property records for a 4-bedroom house in Yorktown Heights, Westchester County, purchased by her parents in 1992. As Vance read the details, the gallery packed with activists and journalists fell into a stunned silence. Property tax, $14,000 annually. Median home value, $547,000. The household income, conservatively estimated between $150,000 and $200,000 per year during her upbringing. Most working-class families don't pay $14,000 in property taxes because they can't afford a $500,000 home, Vance noted. Your father was an architect who ran his own firm, Kirschenbaum Ocasio Roman PC. Your mother was a successful real estate agent during a housing boom. These numbers don't represent a struggle, they represent the top 10% of American households. Vance paused, letting the weight of the $14,000 tax figure hang in the air, a sum that exceeds the total annual income of many families in his hometown of Middletown. He described the Yorktown Heights property in vivid detail. A pristine 4-bedroom residence with a 2-car garage, a finished basement, and a half-acre lot situated on a quiet, tree-lined street where crime was virtually non-existent. In Middletown, Vance said, his voice dropping an octave, we didn't have tree-lined streets and architectural firms. We had pill mills and boarded-up storefronts. My grandmother kept a loaded handgun by her side, not for sport, but because violence was the neighbor that never left. To hear you appropriate that level of hardship while living in one of the safest, most affluent suburbs in the country isn't just a political strategy, it's a deep-seated insult to those who actually survived it. The education of an elite. The deconstruction continued into the realm of education. While the public narrative often highlights her time as a bartender, Vance pivoted to her academic background. He displayed yearbook photos showing her involvement in student government, AP classes, and luxury extracurricular clubs at Yorktown High School, a school that ranks in the top 5% of all New York public schools. You didn't go to a struggling inner-city school, Vance continued. You attended a facility with an Olympic-sized swimming pool and professional-grade theaters. The per-pupil spending there was $24,000 annually, nearly double the national average. From there, you went to Boston University, an institution where the tuition and fees topped $60,000 per year in 2011. You didn't earn that through the GI Bill or military service like I did. You attended because your parents could afford it. Vance leaned forward, emphasizing that while millions of young Americans were struggling with the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, the Congresswoman was enjoying the safety net of an upper-middle-class family. He pointed out that her father's architecture firm specialized in the New York metro area, where owners typically earned between $150,000 and $300,000 annually during that era. "Let's talk about the bartending credential you use as a shield," Vance challenged. "You worked at Flat's Fix in Union Square. That's not a dive bar in a forgotten town. It's an upscale establishment in Manhattan's richest zip code where cocktails cost $20. And the most telling part? While you were struggling, you were living at home in Yorktown Heights, rent-free, with your mother. You weren't choosing between rent and food. You were a privileged graduate, finding yourself in a high-end tequila bar." Throughout this presentation, the Congresswoman's reaction was telling. She reached for her water glass repeatedly, her gaze darting away from the cameras and toward her whispering staff. The fire that usually defines her public appearances seemed dampened by the clinical precision of the data being presented. Her face, usually poised for the perfect social media clapback, was tight with defensive anxiety as the photos of her high school science accolades and affluent home appeared on the monitors. The 2017 relocation. The climax of the session arrived when Vance addressed the timing of her move back to the Bronx. He produced a timeline that suggested her return was less about heritage and more about a calculated political opening. "You lived in Yorktown Heights for 13 years. You lived there through college. You even lived there after college while commuting to Manhattan for work," Vance revealed. "You didn't move to the Bronx until 2017, exactly 1 year before you ran for Congress in that specific district. You rented an apartment in Parkchester for the express purpose of residency requirements." He labeled this move carpetbagging, an attempt to choose a district based on demographic appeal rather than lived experience. It's one thing to be proud of your birthplace. It's another to appropriate a working-class identity you never lived to dismiss those who actually did, Vance concluded. "You claim you are a girl from the Bronx. Technically, you were born there and stayed for 5 years. But you are a woman of Westchester. You are the product of the very elite circles you now pretend to loathe." Vance's final blow was personal. He held up his own military discharge papers. "I joined the Marines at 19 because it was my only way out. I saw Iraq, I saw sacrifice, and I earned my way to Yale Law through the GI Bill. Every step was a battle against the statistics of my birth. You, on the other hand, took the elevator of privilege to the top floor and then pretended you climbed the stairs. Why should the American people trust a leader whose very foundation is built on a fabricated struggle?" The room remained hushed, the socialist superstar narrative visibly fraying under the weight of Westchester reality. The question now looming over the committee wasn't just about economic policy, but about the fundamental honesty of those who claim to lead the movement. Are we witnessing the most significant political unmasking of the decade? As these facts settle into the public consciousness, the conversation is shifting from policy to personality. Why this matters to you? This isn't just about two politicians, it's about the integrity of representation. When leaders fabricate their backgrounds, they create policies based on a fantasy of struggle rather than the reality of it. To ensure you aren't being misled by carefully curated social media personas, look beyond the sound bites. Always verify the origin stories of those who claim to speak for you. Follow the data. Property records and tax filings don't lie, even if politicians do. Demand authenticity. Support leaders who don't feel the need to hide their past to win your vote. Share your thoughts in the comments. Does a candidate's childhood privilege invalidate their advocacy for the poor, or are these personal attacks a distraction from the real issues? If you were in that hearing room, what one question would you ask the Congresswoman? Do not wait for the mainstream media to spin this story. Verify the numbers yourself now. Click like if you believe transparency is essential in leadership, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part of our analysis, where we dive into the staggering financial disconnect of the modern elite and the Met Gala socialism that is sweeping the nation. The bartender paradox, top-shelf tequila and luxury zip codes. Building on the revelation of her Westchester upbringing, the inquiry shifted from the leafy suburbs to the bustling streets of Manhattan. For years, the image of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez behind a bar has been the ultimate symbol of her political authenticity, the every woman taking on the establishment. However, as Senator J.D., Vance adjusted his notes. He prepared to pivot from the property records of Yorktown Heights to the actual mechanics of her much-touted working-class struggle in the city. The myth of the struggling dive bar. You speak of your time as a bartender as if you were pulling shifts in a coal mining town or a forgotten Rust Belt diner, Vance began, his voice echoing through a room that had grown uncharacteristically still. He pulled a colorful menu from his folder and placed it under the projector. But let's look at the reality of Flat's Fix. This isn't a local watering hole for the downtrodden. It is an upscale taco and tequila bar in Union Square, one of the wealthiest, most expensive commercial hubs in Manhattan. Vance began to read the prices aloud, each number landing like a gavel. Cocktails at $22, hand-pressed artisanal tortillas. A clientele consisting almost exclusively of young professionals, tech elites, and tourists with deep pockets. This wasn't a struggle for survival. It was a high-end service job in a luxury environment. To understand the weight of this revelation, one must look at the geography of the narrative. Union Square isn't the Bronx. It is the heart of Manhattan's elite social scene. While the political brand of AOC was built on the grit of the service industry, the reality was a curated experience in one of the most gentrified pockets of the world. Imagine serving a $22 hibiscus margarita to a venture capitalist while claiming to be the voice of the person who can't afford a subway swipe. This is the disconnect Vance aimed to expose, a high-end stage used to rehearse a working-class monologue, the rent-free secret. The room's temperature seemed to drop as Vance moved to the most jarring part of the paradox, the financial safety net that remained hidden behind the apron. While the public was led to believe AOC was barely scraping by to pay Manhattan rents, the senator revealed a different story. During those 18 months at Flat's Fix, Vance noted, looking directly at the congresswoman, you weren't choosing between a subway fare and a meal. You weren't worrying about an eviction notice. Because the truth is, you were living rent-free in your mother's $500,000 home in Westchester, commuting into the city by choice, not by necessity. He paused to let that sink in. Most people working service jobs in New York are doing it to keep a roof over their heads. You were doing it while your roof was already paid for by an architect's legacy. That isn't a struggle. That's a post-grad gap year funded by suburban privilege. This rent-free revelation is the ultimate soundbite of the hearing. It shatters the image of the struggling artist or the paycheck-to-paycheck worker. For the millions of Americans who actually work service jobs, the paycheck is a lifeline. If they miss a shift, they lose their home. For AOC, the shift was a choice. If she had a bad day at the bar, she didn't face homelessness. She took a train back to a 4-bedroom house in a safe, wealthy suburb. Have you ever wondered why some struggles seem so much more photogenic than others? It's because some are backed by a safety net that others can only dream of. Defining struggle. The tension reached a breaking point when Vance compared this curated narrative to the raw reality of the constituents he represents and his own past. Let me tell you what real struggle looks like, he said, leaning forward. It's coming home to find the lights won't turn on because the utility company finally cut you off. It's watching your mother suffer from addiction while you wonder if there's enough gas in the car to get to a minimum wage job that actually pays the rent. The contrast was staggering. On one side, the image of $22 tequila served to the elite. On the other, the memory of cold nights and empty cupboards. Vance described the visceral fear of a child hearing the water stop running because the bill wasn't paid. He detailed the survival math working families do every day. If I pay the electric bill, can we afford eggs? If I fix the car, do we skip the dentist? You use the service industry as a costume, Vance continued, his voice hardening. Real working-class people don't get to take the costume off at the end of the day. They don't have a $500,000 home in Yorktown Heights to retreat to when the struggle gets too real. They are living in it 24/7, with no exit strategy and no wealthy parents to catch them if they fall. As Vance spoke, a heavy silence fell over the squad members present in the room. The usual rapid-fire tweeting and energetic nodding from her allies ceased, replaced by a visible, uncomfortable stillness. Representative Ilhan Omar looked down at her notes, while Ayanna Pressley remained stone-faced, the air of moral superiority in the room evaporating under the weight of Vance's lived experience versus AOC's manufactured one. A media narrative in retreat. Even the press gallery, usually quick to frame AOC's every move as a triumph of the common people, seemed paralyzed. Journalists who had arrived ready to report on a socialist hero were now frantically rewriting their leads. The bartender story, which had been the bedrock of her media appeal, was being systematically dismantled into a story of careerism and brand building. Think about the sheer impact of this shift. For years, the media has sold the bartender to Congress arc as the modern American dream. But Vance's evidence suggests it was more of a suburbanite to Manhattan elite to targeted district pipeline. The cameras, which usually captured AOC's every smirk and clapback, were now focused on her fidgeting with her expensive jewelry. The social media superstar was being held accountable not by a tweet, but by her own employment and property records. The reality check. Why authenticity matters. Is it possible to truly represent the working class when your only experience with their hardship is a costume you wore for 18 months? This isn't just about politics. It's about the fundamental trust between a representative and the represented. When a leader claims to be one of you, while living a life of comfort and security that most will never know, it creates a dangerous vacuum of trust. Here is a step-by-step breakdown of how this rebranding worked. The origin myth. Focus on the birth in the Bronx, ignoring the 13-plus years in wealthy Westchester. The symbolic job. Choose a service job in a high-traffic, elite area, Union Square, to build a relatable image. The hidden safety net. Work the job without the risk, living at home rent-free to maintain the struggling look without the actual struggle. The calculated relocation. Move back to a specific district only when a political opportunity arises. As the facts of the Union Square paradox settle, the question of authenticity looms larger than ever. How much of what we see on social media is a carefully crafted persona designed to hide a life of comfort? This revelation forces us to look closer at the leaders who claim to be one of us. Share this if you believe authenticity should be a requirement for leadership. We need to stop falling for brand stories and start looking at the actual records. Let us know in the comments. Does a leader's upbringing change how you view their policies? Don't let the noise distract you. If you skip this investigation, you are essentially giving a green light to more carpetbagging and identity theft in our political system. Subscribe and smash that notification bell right now, because if you miss the next part, you'll miss the most shocking revelation of all the $29 million socialist secret. If you believe that political leaders should be judged on their actual life experiences rather than their staged backstories, stay tuned. In the next section, we will uncover the calculated timeline that led to the relocation that changed American politics forever. We're going deeper into the archives, and what we found will change how you see the squad forever. Socialism in designer silk and penthouse views. The meticulously constructed image of the struggling bartender didn't just crumble under the weight of her Westchester childhood. It collided head-on with the glittering reality of her current lifestyle. As the hearing moved into its most explosive phase, the focus shifted from where she began to the high-altitude luxury where she currently resides. The Every Woman narrative was about to face its most expensive challenge yet, the $35,000 tax the rich paradox. Senator J.D. Vance reached into his folder and pulled out a high-gloss photograph that filled the room's monitors. It was the infamous image from the Met Gala, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in a white designer gown with tax, the rich emblazoned in blood red across the back. You stood there, Congresswoman, in a dress that costs more than many of your constituents earn in a year, at an event where tickets cost $35,000, Vance said, his voice dropping to a low, rhythmic cadence. While you were posing for cameras and sipping champagne with the billionaire class you claim to despise, the people in the Bronx were wondering how they'd pay their heating bills. This wasn't a protest. It was a coronation. The room crackled with tension as Vance began a mic-side mathematical audit. He pointed out the sheer audacity of attending an event that epitomizes the 1% while wearing a garment on loan or not that required a team of elite designers to create. Some observers in the gallery whispered that this was a masterclass in political theater, while others saw it as a necessary exposure of performative activism. To truly understand the scale of this irony, one must look at the numbers. The dress itself, a custom creation by Brother Vellies, has been valued at over $10,000. When you combine that with the $35,000 individual ticket price, a sum that represents the entire annual take-home pay for a retail worker in Hunts Point the tax, the rich message begins to look less like a policy, demand, and more like a fashion accessory. Imagine a single mother in the 14th district working 2 jobs just to afford childcare, watching her representative dance in a room where the floral arrangements alone cost more than her apartment. Is this representation? Or is it a high society masquerade? Vance leaned forward, his voice sharpening. Socialism, by definition, seeks the redistribution of wealth to eliminate class distinctions. Yet here you are, reinforcing the ultimate class distinction, the velvet rope. You didn't crash the party to demand change, you accepted the invitation to be the guest of honor. When the revolution happens in Silk Tool, it isn't a revolution, it's a marketing campaign. The Navy Yard and the Tesla contradiction. Vance didn't stop at the gala. He moved quickly to her daily life in Washington, D.C., a city where she reportedly resides in one of the most sought-after luxury developments in the Navy Yard district. Let's talk about your working-class commute, Vance continued. On a congressional salary of $174,000, you managed to secure an apartment in a building where the monthly rent starts at $3,200 and can climb much higher. A building that boasts a rooftop pool, a state-of-the-art fitness center, and a 24-hour concierge. Is that the struggle you talk about on Instagram? The Navy Yard is not just any neighborhood, it is the epicenter of DC's new elite. It is a landscape of glass towers and artisanal coffee shops, far removed from the cracked sidewalks and overcrowded subways of the Bronx. When AOC speaks to her followers about the rent crisis, she is doing so from a climate-controlled sanctuary with a view of the Anacostia River. The contradiction is visceral. While her constituents deal with rising crime and failing infrastructure, their representative lives in a fortress of modern convenience. The senator then pivoted to the environmental contradiction that has left many critics stunned. While AOC champions the Green New Deal, a policy that calls for a radical overhaul of American travel and energy, she has been frequently spotted behind the wheel of a high-end Tesla, a vehicle with a price tag often exceeding $60,000. You preach the end of the internal combustion engine to people who can barely afford a bus pass, Vance noted. Yet you drive a luxury electric vehicle and utilize private travel exemptions for your official business. It seems the Green New Deal applies to everyone except the person who wrote it. Think about the average American family. They are being told that their gas-powered SUV is a threat to the planet and that they must transition to expensive electric alternatives. Meanwhile, the woman leading the charge drives a status symbol that costs more than the median annual income in the United States. Furthermore, reports have surfaced of her utilizing gas-guzzling SUVs for short-distance motorcades and taking frequent flights while advocating for the abolition of air travel. This isn't just a policy disagreement, it's a rules for thee, but not for me lifestyle that erodes public trust. The $29 million silence. The atmosphere in the Senate House Joint Committee room turned from heated to haunting as Vance brought up the most controversial figure of the day, $29 million. Allegations regarding her actual net worth have swirled across various digital platforms, and Vance was not afraid to bring them into the official record. There are persistent reports and financial anomalies suggesting your net worth has ballooned far beyond your government salary, Vance stated, locking eyes with her. While you demand transparency from every CEO in America, your own financial trajectory remains a black box. How does a bartender from a struggling background amass that kind of alleged wealth in such a short time? For the first time during the hearing, the Congresswoman's social media-ready confidence seemed to evaporate. Her hands, adorned with expensive Tory Burch jewelry, fidgeted nervously. She looked toward her staff, but they were paralyzed by the silence that had gripped the room. The usual squad allies who often dominate the narrative with rapid-fire tweets were visibly uncomfortable, their phones remaining dark as the mathematical reality of her lifestyle was laid bare. To put $29 million in perspective, if a person earned the standard congressional salary of $174,000 and spent absolutely $0 on taxes, rent, food, or Teslas, it would take them over 166 years to reach that amount. Where does the rest come from? Is it book deals, speaking fees, or perhaps something more opaque? When a politician markets themselves as the enemy of the corporate elite, any sudden influx of multi-million-dollar wealth demands an explanation that Instagram stories cannot provide. Vance closed this section with a devastating comparison that resonated through the halls of the Capitol. "I served in the Marine Corps," he said quietly. "My service involved a desert, a rifle, and a commitment to my country. Your service seems to involve designer dresses, luxury apartments, and Instagram filters. One of these is a sacrifice, the other is a brand. The psychology of the brand versus the reality of service. This isn't just about a dress or a car. It's about the fundamental integrity of the American political system. We are living in an era where influence is often mistaken for leadership. AOC has mastered the art of the viral moment, but Vance's interrogation suggests that the girl from the Bronx is a carefully curated product designed to appeal to the frustrations of the working class while living the life of the upper-crust elite. Consider the bartender narrative one more time. Vance highlighted that she worked in an upscale Union Square establishment while living rent-free in a $500,000 suburban home. This wasn't a struggle to survive, it was a gap year with a safety net. For the millions of Americans who actually live paycheck to paycheck, this appropriation of their struggle is the ultimate insult. It is poverty tourism used to gain a seat at the table of power. Vance's strategy was clear. Strip away the filter. He forced the committee and the watching public to look at the cold, hard data. He used her own tools against her, showing that beneath the tax the rich embroidery lies a woman who has become exactly what she campaigned against, a wealthy, disconnected career politician who uses the language of the oppressed to maintain the lifestyle of the oppressor. Take action. Demand authenticity now. This exposure serves as a critical wake-up call for every voter, regardless of party affiliation. We must stop falling for the aesthetic of change and start demanding the substance of it. If we continue to reward performative activism, we will continue to be represented by actors rather than leaders. How to apply this insight today? Fact-check the narrative. Before supporting a candidate based on their backstory, look at their actual financial disclosures and property records. Authenticity can be verified. Branding is just a mask. Analyze the lifestyle. Ask yourself, does this person live the values they preach? If an environmentalist flies private or a socialist lives in a penthouse, their policies are for you, not for them. Support real service. Prioritize candidates who have a track record of tangible sacrifice. Military veterans, small business owners who risked their own capital, or community leaders who worked without a camera crew. Don't wait for the next viral clip to tell you what to think. If you ignore these contradictions now, you are essentially voting for your own exclusion from the luxury world these politicians build for themselves. As the weight of these financial revelations settles, the focus turns toward the deeper implications of a political movement built on a foundation of contradictions. If the lifestyle doesn't match the lecture, does the movement even exist? This exposure sets the stage for a final look at the calculated maneuvers that transformed a suburban student into a political icon and what it means for the future of American authenticity. Does a leader's private luxury invalidate their public message, or is this simply the cost of doing business in modern politics? Let us know in the comments. Do you believe a politician can truly represent the poor while living like the elite? Use the hashtag #NavyYardParadox to join the debate. Smash that like button if you think transparency is the only way forward, and share this with someone who still believes the bartender myth. Don't miss the final revelation in our next section, where we uncover the ultimate move that sealed the deal. Conclusion: identity or a marketing product? The weight of Senator Vance's final question lingered in the stagnant air of the hearing room, leaving a silence more deafening than the most aggressive of his earlier salvos. As the committee chairman tapped his gavel to signify the end of the session, the carefully maintained facade of political theater began to fracture into raw, unscripted chaos. The final contrast: solitude versus shielding. The immediate aftermath was a study in profound contradictions. Senator J.D. Vance, the man who had just systematically dismantled a carefully crafted political brand, stood up with the same measured calm he had maintained throughout the afternoon. He slid his single manila folder into his briefcase, a simple, utilitarian action, nodded briefly to the court reporter, and walked out the side exit entirely alone. There were no cameras trailing him, no frantic whispers with aides, and no content being created for a digital audience. He simply left, looking less like a political victor and more like a veteran who had completed a difficult but necessary assignment. In stark contrast, the scene surrounding Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was one of desperate damage control. As the hearing adjourned, her extensive entourage, press secretaries, social media managers, and various policy staffers swarmed around her like a human shield. They moved in a tight, frantic phalanx, physically blocking the lenses of the hovering news cameras that were now eager to capture a glimpse of the girl from the Bronx in her moment of visible distress. The squad leader, usually so adept at commanding the frame, kept her head down, her hands still nervously twisting the Tory Burch jewelry that had become a centerpiece of Vance's critique. The professional makeup that had looked so radiant hours earlier now appeared pale and heavy under the harsh fluorescent lights of the corridor. It was a moment where the marketing product was physically shielded from the very public it claimed to represent. A digital battlefield. The reaction. The digital world, however, did not wait for her to reach her office. Within minutes, the internet had become a battlefield of polarized narratives. On one side, a wave of shock and disillusionment rippled through social media platforms. Longtime supporters expressed a sense of betrayal, with the hashtag number Navy Yard Paradox trending globally as users contrasted their own economic struggles with the mathematical reality of her lifestyle. One viral tweet from a self-described Bronx native garnered over 100,000 likes in an hour. "I actually worry about rent every month." Discovering my champion grew up in a $500K house in Westchester while I was struggling feels like a punch to the gut. On the other side, her most ardent defenders doubled down, dismissing the evidence as a patriarchal attack on a successful woman of color. Though even their defense seemed more defensive and less triumphant than usual. They argued that her background shouldn't matter as much as her policy goals, yet this argument rang hollow against the backdrop of a career built specifically on lived experience. The clash between the two sides highlighted a growing rift in the American psyche, the desire for idealistic policy versus the demand for fundamental personal integrity. The integrity crisis in modern politics. This confrontation forces us to confront a haunting question about the state of modern American leadership. In an era dominated by Instagram filters and 280-character manifestos, are we actually electing representatives? Or are we subscribing to highly curated marketing products? The contrast presented in that room was not just between a Republican and a Democrat, but between two fundamentally different versions of authenticity. On one hand, you have a Marine who walked a genuine path from Appalachian poverty to the halls of power through documented service and sacrifice. On the other, you have a political icon who appears to have borrowed the aesthetics of struggle to build a lucrative brand, all while residing in the very lap of luxury she publicly decries. When we vote based on a vibe or a compelling digital aesthetic, we risk ignoring the reality of the person behind the screen. This event serves as a wake-up call. Authenticity cannot be manufactured, it can only be lived. Looking ahead, impact on the upcoming election. As the next election cycle looms, the fallout from this hearing suggests a potential shift in the political landscape. For years, the squad has relied on their status as outsiders, fighting the elite. But after Vance's methodical audit, that outsider status has been called into serious question. Can a movement built on the rhetoric of the oppressed survive when its leaders are exposed as members of the ultra-wealthy elite they claim to despise? Political analysts are already predicting that this moment of truth will embolden primary challengers who can point to their own genuine working-class roots. If AOC can be successfully painted as a carpetbagger who moved to the Bronx for political opportunity rather than community ties, the foundation of her political power could crumble. The chaos in the Navy Yard tonight won't just be about the traffic outside luxury apartments. It will be about the internal crisis of a political brand facing its first real encounter with the truth. We are left to wonder, if the struggle was a lie, what else in the platform is a fabrication? Your move, choosing substance over story. The choice is now yours. Do you value the story a politician tells you on your screen, or the life they lead when the cameras are supposed to be off? Does a leader's private luxury invalidate their public message of socialism, or is this simply the new standard for political survival? Now is the time to act. Before the next election cycle reaches a fever pitch, we must commit to doing our own homework on the leaders we support. Verify the biography. Don't take origin stories at face value. Look for documented service and background. Follow the money. Compare a leader's lifestyle and net worth against the policies they preach. Demand consistency. Support those whose lives reflect the values they claim to champion. Join the conversation now. Smash that like button if you believe politics needs more truth and less theater. Share this article to keep the conversation going. And let us know in the comments, who represents the true working class in 2025? The veteran who lived the struggle, or the activist who markets it? Don't look away now. The most important revelation is how you decide to respond. Your engagement ensures that substance triumphs over shadows.